Never. Every morning, all through the day, I think about Michael. If I wake up through the night, my mind is there.
What if the woman who gave birth to the greatest entertainer the world has ever seen still feels her heart shatter and mend every single time she watches someone become him again? What if a mother's love is so deep that even joy brings pain, because every familiar smile is both a gift and a ghost? Hey family, if stories like this, raw, real, and full of heart move you, I need you to do something for me right now. Hit that subscribe button, turn on notifications. I'm talking immediately, because we're diving deep into a side of the Jackson legacy most people never get to see, and these videos are only getting started. Your support keeps them coming. Thank you. Now, let's get into it. In a quiet corner of a house that once echoed with the sound of 9 children, Katherine Jackson still carries memories that time refuses to soften. Gary, Indiana, in the late 1950s and early 60s, wasn't an easy place. Steel mills, cold winters, and a small, cramped home where money was tight, but dreams somehow found room to grow. There, a young mother with a gentle spirit and a voice that could calm storms would hold her youngest son close, Michael. She would hum softly to him at night, low, warm notes that wrapped around him like a blanket. He was too little to remember the lyrics later in life, but he would always recall the feeling, that unbreakable sense of safety only a mother's lullaby can give. Those quiet moments became the foundation for everything that followed. Katherine noticed something different about Michael almost from the beginning. He had energy that couldn't be contained. As a baby, he'd bounce and move in perfect rhythm to the clunking, rickety old washing machine in their home. That broken-down appliance provided his very first beat. Years later, the world would watch in awe as that same natural rhythm took over stadiums. But for Katherine,
Michael, when he was young, he had a lot of energy. Always moving around, never could sit still.
I noticed you said that he used to dance to the sound of the washing machine.
Yeah, well, that's when he was a baby.
it started with laundry and love in a tiny house on Jackson Street. One ordinary day, the older siblings were gathered in the living room, singing together. Michael, barely 4 years old, sat quietly in the corner, listening. Then, without being asked, he joined in, his small voice sliding perfectly into the harmony like he'd been doing it all his life. The blend was so pure, so unexpected, that his older sister Rebby stood by the door with tears streaming down her face. Katherine still speaks about that moment with wonder. Where did it come from? I don't know. Talent like that doesn't hide for long. In kindergarten, Michael stood on stage at an assembly and sang "Climb Every Mountain" with a power and emotion far beyond his years. His grandfather sat in the audience, a grown man reduced to tears by the voice of his tiny grandson pouring his whole heart into every note. Katherine watched it all, equal parts proud and protective. Because for all the beauty, life in the Jackson household wasn't always soft. Their father, Joe, ran a tight ship. Rehearsals after school stretched late into the night. Perfection wasn't optional. It was expected. The pressure was real, and childhood sometimes felt like it was slipping away before it had a chance to fully arrive. In those moments, Katherine became the balance. Where the voice got loud, hers stayed gentle. Where demands felt heavy, she offered reassurance and quiet strength. She was the one who pulled Joe aside and said, "Listen to them. Really listen." She saw the magic in her children when the world outside still couldn't. And when the Jackson Five began catching real attention, when their names started traveling beyond the streets of Gary, Katherine stayed in the background, never chasing fame for herself, always the steady anchor keeping the family rooted. Michael never forgot that. In his own words later in life, he spoke of how his mother's warmth made it impossible for him to imagine growing up without a mother's love. Her lessons, kindness, consideration, faith, stayed with him even as the lights grew blinding. There was the tender side few outside the family saw. Michael and his brother Marlon were just a year apart, practically inseparable. When Marlon got sick as a little boy, Michael would stand by his bedside with tears in his own eyes, hurting simply because his brother was hurting. That empathy ran deep. He was a loving, giving soul from the very start, the kind of child who felt everything intensely. Katherine remembers it all so clearly. The pride, the worry, the late nights wondering what this extraordinary gift would ultimately cost her son. As the Jackson 5 exploded onto the national scene and then the global stage, life changed fast. Suddenly there were tours, screaming fans, and pressure that never let up. Yet through it all, Michael kept one habit that grounded him. He called his mother. Before big deals, before major decisions, before trusting anyone else with his future, he called home. It wasn't about asking for business advice. It was about safety. Katherine was his soft place to land when the world felt uncertain and dangerous. Even at the height of his fame, that connection remained. Katherine recalls standing backstage at one of his massive concerts, looking out at a sea of over 200,000 people.
Her eyes filled with tears. When Michael noticed and asked what was wrong, she could barely get the words out. "When I held you as a baby, I never dreamed you would have this kind of effect on people." She was shy, never wanting the spotlight. He tried to pull her on stage. She wouldn't budge. But that moment, a mother witnessing her child's impossible dream become reality, stayed with both of them forever. Success brought blessings, but it also brought struggles. The world watched as Michael changed. His appearance, his privacy, the intense scrutiny that followed him everywhere. Katherine saw her son navigating a spotlight that could be cruel. She spoke to doctors about his surgeries, gently trying to protect the boy she still saw beneath the superstar. She worried about how people took advantage of his generous heart. Michael wanted to help everyone, especially children, and it pained her to see others misuse that kindness. Through every high and every low, her love never wavered. Not when fame tested him, not when the world judged, and not even when tragedy came. Losing Michael in 2009 shattered something deep inside Katherine. A mother should never have to bury her child. The pain doesn't have an expiration date. She has said she thinks about him every single morning, every night. Sometimes she wakes in the darkness and her mind goes straight to him. The house feels quiet. The memories louder. But here's where the story takes a turn that feels almost poetic and incredibly bittersweet. Years later, another young man stepped forward carrying the same spark. Jaafar Jackson, Michael's nephew, began preparing to portray his uncle in the much-anticipated biopic. The posture, the voice, the eyes, the movement. Sometimes for a second too long, it's like looking at Michael again. Katherine has sat quietly on set. The music starts. Jaafar steps into character, not as himself, but fully as Michael. And in those moments, time collapses for her. She sees the same dances she once watched her little boy create in the living room. The same passion, the same light. For a fleeting instant, it feels like her son is there again. Then reality settles back in. She cannot call him over. She cannot pull him into her arms and protect him from the world the way she once did. The person in front of her is Jaafar, someone she loves dearly, but the resemblance opens old wounds, even as it brings comfort. A smile that lingers just a little too long, a gesture too familiar, a performance that feels almost too real. In those quiet moments between takes, she might excuse herself from the room. She clasps her hands tightly, as if trying to hold on to something precious that keeps slipping away.
These are the private battles no headline ever captures. No interview can fully explain them. She carries two loves inside one heart. The child she raised and lost too soon, and the young man who brings pieces of him back to life every day. Loving Jaafar is beautiful, but it is not simple.
every familiar note, every moonwalk recreated, every spark in the eyes becomes both celebration and reminder. He was here once. This is the secret strength of Katherine Jackson. A mother's love doesn't end with distance. It doesn't end with time. And it refuses to end with death. It simply transforms, becoming something quieter, deeper, and endlessly resilient. She protected her children when the rehearsals were long and the expectations heavy. She celebrated their triumphs when the world finally caught on. She stood by them through the chaos of fame. And now, in her later years, she watches a new generation carry the legacy forward while she holds the memories close. Michael once wrote that his earliest memories were of his mother singing to him. In a way, her voice has never stopped. It's in the way the family still comes together. It's in the kindness he showed the world. It's in the talent that continues through her grandchildren. Katherine never asked to be famous. She never sought the cameras or the fortune. She simply wanted to raise her children right, to give them faith, love, and the courage to follow their gifts. In doing so, she helped create a cultural phenomenon that changed music forever. But more importantly, she raised a boy who never lost his wonder, even when the world tried to take it from him. Today, at an age when most people slow down, Katherine still carries that quiet strength. She thinks of Michael constantly. The pride, the laughter, the pain, the love that refuses to let go. And when she watches Jaafar bring Michael back to the screen, she sees more than a performance. She sees continuity. She sees legacy. She sees that the spirit her son carried, that unstoppable, joyful, deeply feeling spirit, is still moving through the world. That is the power of a mother's love. It doesn't just nurture one generation. It echoes. It inspires. It survives. If this story touched something deep inside you, if it made you think about your own family, your own memories, or the people who sacrificed quietly so you could shine, do a few things for me. Drop a comment with your favorite Michael Jackson memory, or the lesson you take from Katherine's journey. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it. And if you haven't already, make sure you're subscribed with notifications on. We have so many more untold stories, deep dives, and emotional truths coming from the